Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the driveway. Alright, so we're going to be working back on the old Screet truck today. And we're going to do a little bit of some tuning on the AFC housing. And with a little bit of a help from our friends at BD Diesel Performance, we're going to use their kit and we're going to adjust springs. So right now in the truck I have a very light spring, and what I'm trying to do is I'm going to see if I can cut a little bit of the fuel when it goes into coil bind and see if that can lower our boost pressure a little bit so that we can maybe save the charger a little bit longer. I'm just trying to see if we can still get good power out of the truck, but yet maybe get it back down to 42, 43, 44 PSI versus 48, 50 PSI. So before we do anything, we'll go ahead and give you the part number there. Go on to bddieselperformance.com and get yourself one of those. Again, it's a fairly cheap mod. Most guys start doing any tuning on the AFC housing, the springs are kind of the next thing you're going to go ahead and change, because the stock spring, which is that guy right there. All right, so like I was mentioning, the stock spring is your left spring you see there, and on the right side that's going to be this is the medium duty tension spring. Now when I crack into the AFC housing, I'll show you basically the major difference in spring tension. All right, so right there in front of us is going to be your shutdown solenoid as well as the AFC housing. It's only a number of bolts that hold that into place. It's two 8mm bolts at the bottom to hold the shutdown solenoid, and there's one pretty much on the back side of it, of the shutdown solenoid, well on the inside here of the back cover here, where it also holds the shutdown solenoid. You'll take the other two bolts off as well, which you can see. On the if the AFC housing's never been adjusted or never been messed with, fuel plate's never been pulled out, more than likely you're going to have to deal with the tamper-proof bolts that Bosch put on these pumps from back in the day. They're usually breakaway bolts. What you can do is take a hammer and chisel, snap the head off of them, or you can do like a lot of people do. They take a Dremel or a die grinder and they literally just notch them to the point where you can put a flathead on it and get them out that way. But as you can tell, I've had this pump, or at least the AFC housing, off a number of times. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put you guys on a time lapse, and I'll show you basically the breakdown on how to go ahead and pull it off. Like I said, it's not really a hard job. It's those 4 bolts, the 2 for the shutdown solenoid as well as the 2 bolts that are on top of it. Take your reference hose that, well, I'd show you, but it's really, I don't have it on my truck because I have AFC Live. AFC Live basically uses the boost pressure incoming into the box, going out of the box. That's what feeds the AFC housing. So for the most part, all you're really going to do is going to be I want to say it's a 12mm fitting on the back side of the AFC housing. You'll loosen that up, take that line off. And just like that, guys, she's out. Not really a huge job, like I said. If you have an upgraded intake horn, it makes it a little bit easier to access that one bolt that's on the top left corner. Aside from that, you can get in there with the right tooling, or you can just take the fuel lines off, take the intake horn off, and that gives you all the room in the world at that point. But we'll go ahead and give you kind of a brief breakdown here. All right, so if you've never had one of these torn down, before you get to the back panel here where you see the pre-boost fuel screw, as well as your mid-range and your actual full fueling screw, which is right in there, a little star wheel everybody talks about. You've got your AFC foot right there. If you ever do these jobs where you're pulling it off and you're actually going to do this, you also want to trim this about 1/8 of an inch. You can get away with up to about 1/4 inch of cut down, which is basically you take that 10mm bolt right there out, and you can pull that housing off right there, as well as take the front cover off, and you can slide that right off. It's not really a big. All right, so like I was saying earlier, not a whole lot of work here you got to do. Just a couple of bolts Most of them are the breakaway screws that are in here. There's only one breakaway bolt on the back side of the AFC housing. The rest of them are just little screws, little flatheads. Keep constant pressure back here because, again, you're overcoming a spring in there. So if you just unscrew these, everything in the housing will just kind of fly out at you a little bit. So you just want to be mindful of that when you disassemble these. Take the last screw out, take the cover off, clean all this off when you're putting it all back together. Alright, so you got a 10mm nut that's holding on the diaphragm, as well as a little wavy flat washer. Make sure you take all that off. Now, if you've never had this torn down, there's going to be a double set of washers here. This kit does not include the body washers, but all of this, again, you can purchase. It's an old mod that's been around for 20 years, it feels like, anymore. But your housing's going to have oil in it, and I will show you right in there. You can actually see that is your star wheel adjuster. That is your power screw, as they call it. And that's basically what you're going to put your spring and adjustment there. So mine's maxed out, but just kind of wanted to give you guys kind of an angle there. And also, before I forget, you want to make sure you cover this up. This is the opening into the AFC housing, where your fuel rack and all is. You want to make sure that this is covered before, or once you remove it. Once you remove the AFC housing, just leave it covered up. You don't want any dirt, debris, anything like that getting into your pump. Again, these are durable pumps, but you know, any fuel pump of any sort is only going to take so much debris to get into it and to cause issues. All right, so this is my little display here for you. So you've got your stock spring that comes in every pump. So it doesn't matter if it's, again, like I've told you guys before, 160, 180, 175, 215, they're all the same spring that's going to be in there. And then you have your lighter tension BD spring, which was in my truck at the time. And then to the right of that, you're going to have, that's your medium duty tension spring. So with the same amount of force applied, you can see that there is a drastic difference in spring tension between the three. Now, with the stock spring, if you were to crank down on the star wheel, or your basically your max power screw, or whatever you want to call it, I call it the mid-range, high-range fuel adjustment. If you crank that all the way down and you click it to the point where it stops, the more fuel that you're sending at that point, the more boost reference is getting into the back of the AFC housing, the more that spring is going to be put into coil bind. When that happens, that low range, when you really get on the throttle off the line, whether it be at a stoplight or if you're drag racing, whatever, that's where you get all that excessive fuel from. All that excessive fuel is obviously excessive heat, or excessive smoke, I'm sorry. So when you have all that excessive smoke, you have excessive fueling, and it's creating a lot of heat, high EGTs. So if you put one of these springs in there, it helps you control your fueling a little bit easier, as well as control your smoke. That's the whole idea behind it. All right, so install is just as easy as removal. And like I've said before, you want to make sure everything is clean and not get brake clean all into your GoPro. That would also be a benefit. So make sure everything's clean. Grab your new spring, whichever one it is you choose. Like I said, I'm going with the medium tension spring to cut a little fuel, hopefully cut a little smoke as well, as it is kind of excessive. And while you're in there, just check and see if you have any dirt, debris, anything of question at that point. Like I was speaking of earlier, you can do the old body washer trick on these, which is basically there should be one stock one that you get that holds right in the back side of the diaphragm, okay? And then you can use an old body washer and double stack them, and that will give you a little bit more pre-tension on that spring than factory, which again will give you more fueling. I mean, all this is just you're trying to trick that diaphragm to try to get that AFC foot to move a little bit more under the same amount of boost pressure. And everything again is under, you know, a good amount of pressure here, so you want to make sure that you're constantly kind of holding a little bit of pressure. Use the AFC foot and hold pressure back as well. Don't forget your wavy washer and the 10mm nut. Just make sure everything's cleaned up pretty good when you putting this all back together. Again, like I stated before, not really a hard job by any means. Inspect your diaphragm as well. If you have any serious cuts or nicks in it, you can purchase new diaphragms. There are a couple different vendors out there that still have these old truck parts and stuff like that, where you can still get all your parts you need for it. But the diaphragm, it's like anything else. You get a puncture hole into it or whatever, and it's going to start to have issues. So we're going to go ahead and finish up reassemble here, and we're going to put it all back together, put it back in the truck. I will show you guys the way that I do it, and I think a lot of people do it with AFC housings. You want to push them as far forward as you can, because again, the housing is slotted. If you can look here, you can see the bolt holes are all notched, so you can actually have some adjustment to them. Again, I'll show you that once we put the reassemble back together. So, all right guys, also in a side note, there is a gasket here in your AFC housing. Make sure that that is still intact, it's in good shape. Again, if you need to purchase another one, they are available still. Even though these trucks are so old, you can still purchase these gaskets out there. But just make sure before you install that everything is cleaned up, prepped. You want to stay as clean as you possibly can before install. The bolts that are in the back housing here, you will get new bolts to replace the breakaway bolts. They're all Allen heads they use with the BD kit, and then you'll see again there are the 3 other screws. There's always one tamper-proof bolt that they want you to break away, just like at the top of the housing, where you're going to have at least, I think it's 2. It's been years since I've actually had to take one apart, but there has been at least 2 breakaway bolts on the top there, and then you have your 2 that usually hold on the shutdown solenoid. All right, so now you've gone through the strife of installing it, putting it back on the truck. Now, if you can see, you have slight adjustment. If you go too far back, it really, at that point, hinders, makes it hard to start. A little bit low on power. Now, if you can push it as far forward as you can, I put all the bolts in, and that kind of helps me on knowing how far forward or back I can go. So if you have a fuel plate, you're kind of fighting the AFC foot and the fuel plate on the install. I don't have a fuel plate, I have the AFC live, so that's one less thing to worry about. But just push that as far forward as you can, and again, lock down your bolts. It doesn't have to be, you know, uber tight. This is not really a, you know, massive need a torque wrench kind of deal, but just snug them up. And you're trying to avoid any oil leaks at that point. So we're going to put it back together, and we'll see where we go from there. Guys, so we're going to go ahead and try it. She definitely feels like she's got more power than she did, which is good, but I don't know if she's going to cut back my fueling like I was hoping she would. So let's go ahead and give her a rip. I think that solves our problem. Not really. I think we're back to square one here. I'll check back with you guys here shortly. Close out the video here. Again, for the AFC springs from BD Diesel Performance, I will leave a link in the description below, and you guys can go and pick them up from there. Again, part numbers and everything are listed in the link as well. And we're getting ready to go into Christmas, so for everybody, if I don't see you guys next weekend when I tape my next video, I'll see you in the next one. Merry Christmas, and like, subscribe, and share. Comment down below. Tell me what you guys think of these videos. That's all I got for you guys now. See you in the next one.